Hello, Phil here from Wings of Pegasus and welcome to another analysis video. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. On the agenda tonight, we're going to be looking at some reeling in the years archive footage of Gerry Rafferty, and this is coming from 1978 and he's going to be playing through Baker Street. So let's get Gerry up on screen and see how he gets on.
This city desert makes you feel so cold. It's got so many people, but it's got no soul. And it's taken you so long to find out you were wrong when you thought it held everything. You used to think that it was so easy. You used to say that it was so easy. But you're trying now. Another year and then you'd be happy. Just one more year and then you'd be happy. But you're crying now. He opens the door, he's got that look on his face, and he asks you where you've been. You tell him who you've seen, and you talk about anything. He's got this dream about buying some land. He's gonna give up the booze and the one-night stands, and then he'll settle down in some quiet little town and forget about everything. But you know he'll always keep moving. You know he's never gonna stop moving. 'Cause he's rolling, he's the rolling stone. And when you wake up it's a new morning. The sun is shining, it's a new morning. And you're going home.
I'm just going to jump in here and cut off Raphael in mid-flow because the saxophone, of course, in this track is one of those things that pops out, makes it so distinctive, everybody knows it, but also there is the quality that you can find in Gerry's voice that is also so distinctive, and it's something that sets this track apart. And let's just mention here about what a great performance this is by the band all round in order to get such a close representation of the record, but live. And we've made a few concessions maybe with the flute sound at the beginning being played on keys, and it's interesting that Raphael thought that his original saxophone recording was flat, and every time he'd hear the song, it would be enough to annoy him. And this is just the case with musicians, is that they are so self-critical, but also only ever hear the worst in their playing. And it's something that he really found annoying when he listened to the track, that it was just a little bit flat. Of course, it doesn't matter to everybody else listening to it. It's just a great saxophone solo. I think if anything, it's going to give it a human element. It's going to give it more expression. And this is something that I mentioned about music in the 50s and 60s and 70s, the time before auto-tune. Having that human element in there is going to give you that slight imperfection in the sound, which makes it sound human and not mechanical. And that's what you get from all these performances. And those performances before digital that were just captured on a record, they have so many imperfections in there that make it vulnerable. The sound, you can hear the performer in the sound, and it's something that makes every single song unique because you get to hear the expression of each individual performer. But getting back to the song, because this is one of those that has such a dynamic range, and you can tell straight away because of the fact that we've got a saxophone solo. The saxophone as an instrument is so in your face. Dynamically, it really does hold everyone's attention if there is a saxophone solo. Of course, when you got someone like Raphael playing, it means that he puts great dynamic control within his playing, vibrato, but also letting some of the notes stand out and then just easing off some of the other notes. So you get a really great dynamic range on the instrument, which is what all the great players can do, regardless of which instrument they're playing. And then we get that stark contrast as soon as the verse comes in, and we have Gerry's silky smooth vocal that just is so easy to listen to. It's almost that spoken vocal, and you can listen to those lyrics. Everything's perfectly clear and concise with the vocal, and now we're down low dynamically. We're just really recovering from that intro and from that solo. It gives such a great effect and makes it so interesting. And the progression that he throws in there, it makes such an interesting journey outside of this saxophone solo, and also the instrumentation that's thrown in the background, because here I said great live performance because we've got those elements just coming in and out in the background that just keep it interesting the whole time. And Gerry was one of those guys that started in his teenage years busking. He also busked on the London Underground. He joined a band called the Humble Bums, and that included the comedian and actor Billy Connolly. And Tam Harvey was also in that band, but Tam left, so Gerry and Billy were still left from that band and recorded 2 albums with Transatlantic Records. They went their separate ways in 1971 after a couple of years of being together, and Gerry was then signed as a solo artist to Transatlantic Records, and he worked on his first album and he released that, and that was called Can I Have My Money Back? And even though it was critically a success, it wasn't commercially a great success, unfortunately. And in 1972, Gerry joined up with Joe Egan to form Stealers Wheel, and probably one of their biggest hits was Stuck in the Middle with You. The problem that they had with the setup is that they were working with other songwriters, so the copyrights and the royalties was a minefield, so much so that when they went their separate ways in 1975, Gerry was unable to release anything for 3 years. In 1978, fortunately, he could then release his second solo album called City to City, and that album included this track, Baker Street, and that was the same year of this performance that we're looking at now. And interestingly, according to the producer Hugh Murphy, he said that they had to beg the record label to release Baker Street as a single because the record label said that it was too good to release, whereas I don't think you can ever have a song that's too good to release as a single. But anyway, they released it and it was a monster hit. And that album, City to City, was the album that then removed the Bee Gees' Saturday Night Fever album from the top spot in 1978. So what a feat that was. But let's get back to the performance. we have it. So we've got some interesting points to be made when the guitar solo comes in, because I mention a lot of things in other videos and really focusing on guitars and guitar solos about expression, control, and all the different techniques that a lot of players and the top players have. So we can see a great contrast between these two instruments, because when Raphael comes in with his saxophone, we've got so many techniques that he employs in order to get the expression in his playing, and vibrato is one of those key techniques that you'll find on a lot of instruments that absolutely get that instrument to sing. So looking at the guitar solo, you can tell that it doesn't quite sit in to the groove and the feel of the rest of the track, and there are a few reasons for that. First of all, I always say about players that have great slide technique, the accuracy with which they can slide. Unfortunately, getting into the solo, we just get a little bit over with that slide, maybe 1 fret too far, and as soon as you go too far with the slide, it's going to be really difficult to recover because you only hear the end destination. Of course, I'm looking at that guitar solo from a player's perspective, but also a teacher's perspective. Maybe Joe Public, who doesn't play, might have felt it's okay, or if you've been watching this channel for a while, maybe it sounded a little bit like trying to put a square into a round hole. It didn't quite fit because of the way that it was played and the technique and the feel that was involved in it. So these things that come together is where you really get to appreciate the top players, how they combine these techniques in order to get their solos to fit the track. Also, within the runs, we had a little run there in the solo, and what you'll find with the top players is they'll put dynamic control within a run. So some notes will be louder, some will be quieter, to get a little bit more expression in there, with alternate picking as well to control those runs and control that expression. It's always going to be highlighted when you've got a guy like Raphael who's putting together runs on the saxophone with that dynamic control. By no means am I saying that it was a disastrous guitar solo, but there are things that you can always take away from other players, and you can think, well, how could that have been changed musically to fit the feel of the track more? And that's what all the top guitarists do, and the ability they have is to make their guitar solo sit into a track. The Reelin' in the Years archives is a great channel to find some of these performances. The link to this is going to be in the description below, so you guys can check out the whole video if you want to, and the channel that it's being hosted by. But just talking about licensing and copyrights, because Gerry was one of those guys that was a true artist and wasn't at all interested in the music industry side of things. In fact, it really did alienate him as an artist himself, because he wasn't interested in the fame and everything that went with the songs, having to get publicity and doing all of those celebrity type things with the music. It didn't appeal to Gerry at all, and it was one of those things that he wanted his music to be put out as an artist, and I know that he did refuse a lot of adverts and advertisers who wanted to use Baker Street. So a lot of advertisers were turned down by Gerry, and you can imagine that if it was put on an advert that maybe was for a product that wasn't so good, the integrity of the track might have suffered. But of course Gerry wouldn't allow that to happen, and he did mention that this track in particular, Baker Street, made him on average £80,000 a year. So he did say that he could live comfortably the rest of his life just on the royalties that he got from this being played on radio and being played on the TV. Just talking about the saxophone solo, Raphael did originally say that he came up with the melody for that, but then they went back to the original demo that Gerry had come up with, and Gerry had placed a very similar line in the spot where the saxophone solo then was recorded. So I think it was Gerry's work. Just hats off to Gerry for writing it in the first place. Such a talented singer-songwriter he was. But thank you so much for suggesting this video for me to take a look at, and keep those suggestions coming in the comments below. Let me know what you guys think, and if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and I'll see you guys at the next one. Rock!